So now we're going to deal with a little bit of blend if because Eileen asked me to do some blend if, and so I promised her I would. So I'm going to show you two different blend if techniques. One's going to be with colored overlays, and then I'm going to show you my favorite one, which is using hue and saturation layers. So let's open up this thing here. Okay, so this is kind of what I would call, I guess you could call this split toning or color toning an image, where we're going to color tone the highlights and the shadows with color overlays. This is what the finished image is going to look like. We're going to put some blues in the shadows, and we're going to put some yellows in the highlights. Okay. And to do that, we're going to use blend if. I probably don't have enough time to go through my presentation on blend if. So if you're not familiar with blend if, I'm going to demo it tonight using these layers or these two techniques. But I do have a whole presentation on how blend if works, and maybe we can do that at some other time. But tonight we're just going to demo how it works. So I have this image, and I'm putting this blue layer over the top of it. And I want this blue to only go into my shadows. But I won't be able to know whether it's in my shadows because I have no visual representation of where my shadows are. So the way I like to use blend if is I like to go into my settings, and I like to turn on a color overlay. And my favorite color for colored overlays is magenta. And the reason why I like to use magenta, oops, I got to add this down here. I was not pointing to the wrong one here. The reason why I like to use magenta is magenta, unless you're a flower photographer, like Terry, unless you're a flower photographer, magenta doesn't occur in a lot of our images naturally. So it's a good color to use as a targeting color. So I'm going to start here with this blue, and I'm going to put it in my shadows. So how do I do that? I'm going to go over here and I'm going to go into blending options, and I want this color to only go into my shadows. So what I want to do is I want to say, I don't want this layer to go to my underneath layer in anything except the dark. So I want to protect all of the colors other than my darks. So I'm going to move these sliders down here until I see the pink is going to show me where that blue, that sounds kind of funny, but the pink is my targeting color, is showing me where this layer is going to end up on my image. And I can see that I'm protecting everything in my image except where that pink targeting is. And you can see from my image, if I would turn this stuff off, that this is my shadow. The shadow's on that door, the shadow behind that pot, the shadow of the cross. So I can play with this thing until I'm convinced that that's where I want the blue to go. And if I hold down my Alt key, Option if you're a Mac user, I can feather this out a little bit so that it's not a really harsh application of that blue. And now I just turn that off. And if it's a little too strong, I mean, obviously I can always adjust I say, okay, I can always adjust this a little bit so it's not, this layer is not so, and if I wanted to change my blend mode, make it overlay, and adjust it a little bit. Or I can maybe try soft light. Oop, I somehow got right back to put it in soft light. So I've put some, not that one, silly, you're on the wrong layer. Hard light, no, soft light. So we put a little bit of blue into our shadows, and we only put it in the shadows. It did not go anywhere but into the shadows. And you can play with this. I mean, you can play with your blend modes if you like multiply, whatever. Now we want to go up here to this layer. And again, we have our targeting color turned on. And on this layer, we're going to go to our blend if, blending options, and we only want the yellow in our highlights. So we want to protect our shadows and our midtones from getting any of that yellow. We only want it to go into our highlights. So we bring over this protection of our shadows. We can spread this out a little bit by holding down our Option key, Alt key, spread that out a little bit. We can also split this a little bit if we want to make that, feather that out a little bit so it's not so harsh. Now let's turn off our target. Say okay. And if we wanted to put this into, like, again, overlay, because we don't want it to be a hammer. It's up to you. You can play with it after you've done it. So there you have it. You put a little bit of yellow in your highlights. You put a little bit of blue in your shadows, and you've split toned that image. So let's group these things together. There's your after, and there's your before. So that's using blend if to split tone color tone an image using blend if with color overlays, color overlays.